Here we are. By the way, for anyone who's watching yesterday, we were at Resolute Brewing out in Centennial. We told everybody we were going to stick around because they had trivia last night. It's exactly what we did. So not to spray on our shoulders, patting ourselves on the back, but, we won, champions. So, let's go ahead and bring that in for a little bit today. We don't get to be out there today and take advantage of our free beers that we won at Resolute, but we are still getting ready for the Broncos preseason opener against the 49ers. Shawn Drotar, Nate Lundy with you from Mile High Sports today. Alex Becker in the booth sitting in as Danny Bailey is taking a much-deserved break for a couple days. So nice to have Alex riding with us. And Nate, the presumption here as the Broncos and the Niners get after it in their joint practice. They'll be off tomorrow, and then the big game on Saturday, obviously, is where we start getting a little more of an idea where the Broncos will be. But the presumption is that the running game is not expected to be improved. The expectation is it's fixed, right? I mean, you have the offensive line returning. ESPN said they had the best pass blocking win rate and one run blocking win rate in the NFL last year. They're all back. And instead of Javonte Williams, now you've subbed out J.K. Dobbins, RJ Harvey, a veteran with experience, a newcomer with a lot of explosiveness, and you've retained Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, Tyler Bidet, and Blake Watson, and they'll sort out the depth after that. The assumption is the Broncos running game basically is just, it's fixed, it's solved, right? That's what happens when you play these games on paper, but they don't play it on paper. And the Broncos didn't think they'd have a running game as bad as they did last year. They managed to work around it, but we haven't really spent a lot of time thinking, what happens if the running game isn't really fixed? What happens if it's still a work in progress?
Well, and I think that's one of the big things we got to try to answer, Shawn, is because there's a lot of assumptions taking place right now across this team. And look, some of those assumptions and some of the things that ESPN, NFL Network, all these different analysts are talking about with the Broncos, I think are very accurate. We do know how good their defense is going to be. We do know that they have a tremendous secondary. We know that they can win things in the trenches, both offensively and defensively. But I think, going into last year, unfortunately, they thought that Javonte Williams would be able to bounce back from that injury that he had. He didn't. He didn't perform like the guy that they saw prior to the injury. And so, unfortunately, the running game didn't do what it was supposed to do last year. And the most reliable legs that they had in the running game belonged to Bo Nix last season instead of to one of the running backs. And so I think there is actually a legitimate question, Shawn, I know we don't like to play the what if game, right? Because there's always the opportunity that somebody gets hurt, something happens, and teams wind up having to go down a road within their personnel or their depth chart that they weren't planning on due to an injury. But there is part of me that asks this question: what happens if RJ Harvey doesn't do what they think he can do? What happens if J.K. Dobbins is not able to respond the way that they are hoping and doesn't have the explosiveness that we have seen a J.K. Dobbins have over the course of his NFL career? Then what winds up happening? Do you wind up having to go into free agency and try to find somebody that's left on the scrap heap? Do you wind up having to lean into Audric Estime or Bidet or one of these guys more than you want to? It's kind of a scary thought, Shawn, but it's one, obviously, that the coaching staff and the team has had to think about. And so I think it's one worth discussing.
Yeah, I mean, if they thought it was solved when they drafted RJ Harvey in the second round, they wouldn't have picked up J.K. Dobbins. Obviously, they realized they did. And so let's unpack that a bit and figure out why they did that. Because you bring up the point of Bo Nix. Bo Nix, by the way, had that transverse fracture in his vertebra in his back at the end of the year. You don't want him to be Jaden Daniels. You don't want him to be Lamar Jackson. That's not what's going to be best for the Broncos, and it's not really what's best for Bo Nix. He can be opportunistic in the run game, and there's certainly opportunities to scheme things, but you don't really want him to be a runner first and foremost. So you want to avoid having to do that at all. Jaleel McLaughlin, although the Broncos really like what he can do, he's not a guy that you're going to get a lot of running through the tackle success, no matter what kind of holes the Broncos are putting together, because he's basically my size, a lot faster, but only how many tackles are you going to break, when you weigh $180? I mean, I know he lists as more than that, but he's a small, speedy guy, so you can't really do a lot with him. We know at the challenges, Estime has had a great camp when the pads have been on, and you hope that something builds with that. But let's look at why they did that. In Harvey, they wanted more explosiveness. They wanted the home run threat. They wanted a guy that could catch passes out of the backfield. But Harvey, as a rookie, is probably not good at pass protection. Moreover, Harvey was never even asked to do it at UCF. You know that's a big part of Peyton's offense, that you don't let the quarterback get hit. If you can't pass protect, you can't play. And it's one of the reasons that, as you pointed out, even though Javonte Williams had clearly not been able to recover from that from all those surgeries, the reason he was in the most of the time is he was a reliable pass catcher. And most importantly, he was by far their best pass protecting running back. That's what you're not expecting out of Harvey from the get-go. And the Broncos decided, hey, if we don't have Bo Nix, we don't have anything. So we've got to add someone. They bring in J.K. Dobbins, who's a good pass protector, good at blitz pickup, can catch out of the backfield and do a lot of those things, even if he doesn't have the explosiveness of Harvey. But going, back to what the Broncos thought over the course of the season kind of informs the way we should look at this room.
Oh, without question. But I think it's so funny because the what you just identified in terms of what the Broncos tried to answer with RJ Harvey and answer with J.K. Dobbins raised an equal number of questions, right? I mean, what does happen? I mean, again, I'm going back to something really simple, and I'm not trying to be catastrophic here, but let's say J.K. Dobbins deals with something that bangs him up a little bit, and he has to miss 2 games, just 2.
And that's not unusual. This is a guy with a lengthy injury history.
Correct. And so when I think about this idea of, okay, this guy's going to miss, let's say 2 games. That's it. I'm trying to be, like I said, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom Chicken Little here on today's show. But what I'm trying to say is, let's say he misses 2 games. If that all of a sudden are 2 games that Sean Payton feels that he has to call differently because he can't rely on this extra protection in the pocket, I mean, look at last season. 1 loss could be the difference between you're playing wild card weekend or you're sitting at home. And that's why I raised the question of what if ... J.K. Dobbins can't stay on the field for all 17 games? What if by the time we get into full speed NFL games, RJ Harvey is not the guy that they thought that they drafted and he's not able to keep up? Kind of like Audric Estime. I mean, you've been the one that has been pounding on what happened with Estime last season. Shawn, you have brought up repeatedly to everybody. This is a guy that was inactive when it mattered the most. And that says a lot about where he was. Now, that's not to say that he has not spent the offseason or this particular training camp getting better and being someone that the Broncos can rely on, but it does tell you who he was last season. Well, what if RJ Harvey follows that exact same pattern here in 2025? And it's not to say that he can't contribute, but what if he doesn't hit a particular spot on the ladder that this team needs him to hit? Those are questions. As much as we want to see this running game get going, and those of us that remember number 30 in the backfield, right, and what he brought to John Elway at quarterback, once they had 30 behind him, it changed the game. It changed what Shanahan could do. It changed so much about the Broncos and their fortunes in the back-to-back Super Bowls that they were able to enjoy. What if this running game doesn't do what we all hope that it can do? And that's why I was concerned. J.K. Dobbins is a little bit different, Shawn, right? Because we're talking about a guy that is a veteran. We know a little bit about his injury history, things like that. But last year, we had some good feelings about Audric Estime. Maybe not at the same level as RJ Harvey, but we had good feelings, and he didn't live up to them. And all I'm trying to say is, as we sit here on August 7th, do we need to be thinking about what does this team do if RJ Harvey isn't the guy?
Well, certainly General Manager George Payton is thinking about it. That's his job. And so when we try to look back and realize that if they had thought, if they were confident, look, there are a couple spots, right? And it's unusual to make the comparison, but in training camp for the Broncos, they have 1 kicker, Will Lutz, and 1 punter, rookie Jeremy Crawshaw out of Florida. That is unusual. Every team usually likes to bring in a extra kicker, a extra punter, especially when one's a rookie for competition, right? But the Broncos looked at Lutz and they say, we know what we have. Why bother taking any reps out? They love Crawshaw, and they said, we're just going with this guy. We'll coach the rest of it. We love the leg strength. We're not worried about splitting his reps. That's the kind of confidence in a rookie that with RJ Harvey, after he was drafted, then they went and got Dobbins. And so that tells you a little bit that they are not of the same level of we're 100% sure, and they shouldn't be. I'm glad you brought up Terrell Davis, because that's a good point. Granted, Harvey was drafted a little bit higher up than Audric Estime, but if you look at Harvey's college numbers, Estime's college numbers, both incredibly productive backs at the collegiate level. Harvey at Central Florida, but Estime at Notre Dame, right? On a Notre Dame team that we know the reputation of that program. We know what they tend to produce, and he was phenomenal there. Terrell Davis was a 6th-round pick out of Georgia, another terrific program, but the reason that he wasn't picked higher is because it was, one, not today's media world in which every college football game is on television somewhere, but he backed up then and star Garrison Hurst. So Davis flew under the radar because he didn't get the carries because, of course, Garrison Hurst, who went on, by the way, to star for some of the teams, including the 49ers, who the Broncos will be playing on Saturday. But Garrison Hurst kind of blotted out the opportunity to scout Davis in reality, and he made his way up. But this idea that someone had great college production, like Harvey did, like Estime did, or that they were drafted from a school that has a long history of really good programs, like Notre Dame or like Georgia, none of these things are guarantees by any stretch. And especially when you're talking about the running back position, which is the easiest position in the NFL to jump from college to the pros when it comes to having the ball in your hands, right? Getting the ball, hitting the hole you're supposed to hit. That's the same in college. It's the same in high school. That's just your job. But blitz pickup, pass protection, when you're supposed to go on certain stems on your routes, what options you're supposed to take. Are you supposed to chip a guy? These are all things that at the NFL level become absolutely critical. You make a mistake, your quarterback's hurt, and you can't go out on the field unless you have it. So they understand that Harvey, who was asked to do none of that, just like Estime was asked to do none of that at Notre Dame, the bar is going to be higher in learning how to do that because it's almost entirely new for some of these guys. In Terrell Davis's case, he made it because he made a big special teams play in Tokyo because drafted out of the 6th round. That's how you have to do it. But Harvey and Estime, not special teams guys, not asked to do that. Davis is a backup to Hurst, actually was. So he had an opportunity to be ready for this. I think it's smart that they picked up Dobbins. You certainly cross your fingers that he'll be healthy because I think if J.K. Dobbins had been healthier through his career, we'd be talking about him as a star in this league and he wouldn't be on the Denver Broncos at all. But the reality is, yes, that the idea that this can just get microwaved isn't always the case. And the Broncos do have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely, they have to keep it in mind. And you brought up a lot of good things about, like, look, when somebody comes out of college and you're asking them to hit the hole, right? You just talked about that when it comes to, like, look, you got to come in, you got to hit the gap that the offensive line is doing for you, and then you got to make things happen yards after the catch. What do we criticize young running backs in the NFL for? Hesitation, in terms of just hit the hole and go, right? It's the old Shanny, right? One cut and go, or they get happy feet. Right, where they're like, "Oh, do I want this hole? Do I want this hole? Where do I want to go? Am I going to go over the guard?" They get hesitant, and they get happy feet. It's the same thing that quarterbacks do, by the way. But the one thing that so many of them have not been called on to do in college is exactly what you pointed out, which is the pass blocking and to be able to protect the pocket and things like that. I think that the good running backs know how to be able to hit the hole. Now it's just a matter of, are you quick enough? Are you strong enough? Do you protect the ball well enough to be able to make positive plays for your team? Snap in, snap out every single time you're out there on the field. But blocking is a very different thing because not only is it something that some of these guys have not been asked to do, Shawn, as you just pointed out, it could be things that they were not asked to do in the college ranks, depending upon the offense they were running or the type of conference they were in or things like that. But they also haven't had to go up against guys that are this big, that are this quick, right? I mean, that's what gets these guys in trouble, is they perhaps overestimate their skill set compared to their defensive counterparts. They are not facing off with the same things that they did within their conference or within their non-conference schedule when they were back in college. What they saw at UCF or what they saw at fill in the blank college is not the same as what you're seeing in the NFL. And so I agree with you. Those are questions for an RJ Harvey, for example, that you cannot answer until you put him out there on the field. And that is why I think George Paton did the exact right thing in bringing in a guy like J.K. Dobbins, because you do know that Dobbins can do it. And in a perfect world, you want RJ Harvey to be your guy. And that's not a knock on Dobbins in any way. I hope he comes in and has a tremendous amount of impact on this team offensively. But this squad wants RJ Harvey to be the guy, because that tells you that you've got the guy not just for week 1 against the Titans, not just week 2 against the Colts. It tells you that you've got a guy that can help you for the next couple of seasons.
And to have a comfort level with that, you have to see him not gain that, not elevate to that spot by default, whether it's an injury to Dobbins or, the fact that McLaughlin can't really run through the tackles with regularity. You want him to take it. You want RJ Harvey to take J.K. Dobbins' job. J.K. Dobbins is on a 1-year deal. He very much does not want a rookie to take his job. And that kind of competition is actually healthy for both these players. It encourages them to go ahead and learn what they need to learn, pick things up quickly. But you're right. They want Harvey to be the guy. They drafted him to be the guy, but you want him to take that role from the veteran ahead of him. And Dobbins isn't going to make it easy for him as long as he can stay on the field. So that's obviously a big part of this too. So for the Broncos running game, injuries are unavoidable. They happen. You understand that's a risk. Running back is a position is the shortest career in the NFL, and that you can't do much about. But what you can do about is in the way you call it. We talk about this with Troy Rank almost every week on this program when we have him on talking about the running game. Some of this also lands on Sean Payton. Sean Payton has to commit to running the ball, has to commit to having a guy out there, has to live with some mistakes because it's the only way guys learn. He did it with Bo Nix, who threw 4 interceptions in the first couple of games of his career, right? You need to be able to let Harvey makes some of those mistakes as long as it doesn't put Nix at a lot of risks. So that means you have to run a little bit more. We saw him run the ball on one of his Waffle House menus last year, but he didn't continue to do it. And now all of a shout out to my daughter.
But that was just, he was.
Oh, no, he was trolling us. He was trolling
us.
He was going after us. But the truth of the matter is his scheme-based offense in which he substitute guys out so much can have problems with running backs. And running backs have spoken about this. My old colleague Sandy Clough used to say, you guys got to work up a lather. You got to get into the game. You got to get some carries to get a vibe. But Peyton has a tendency of switching guys out so quickly based on situations that nobody really gets a chance to get in the game. It's one of the reasons the Broncos have not had a 100-yard rusher in his entire tenure.
No, I would agree with that 100%. Not only do you need to get guys in rhythm, but let me switch over to the defensive side of the ball, Shawn. I think that's one of the reasons why, you can take a guy like Von Miller, for example, excuse me, where he is in his career right now. And you can say, hey, I'm putting him out there as an extra pass rusher. I'm putting him out there to be able to try to wreak havoc on a third down. But you know what? Go back and look at the seasons where Von had the success in the Denver Broncos uniform. It was because he was out there constantly. And he got to the point where he started to figure out how he could beat a particular tackle or how he could do a move to get past the right side or the left side of the offensive line and get to the quarterback. Even Von Miller was the guy that needed to work up that lather, to use Sandy's term. And so it's not just running backs. I think that applies to a lot of guys that are asked to make big plays. You need a rhythm out there on the field to be able to do it. And so, yes, does Sean Payton ride the hot hand? And a lot of coaches do that, by the way. Just look at Dan Campbell up in Detroit when it comes to riding the hot hand of your running backs, okay? There's a lot of coaches that do it, and I understand why they do it, but I also completely understand why there are certain running backs that say that works against them because they can't get the momentum going. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's complicated, and hopefully we'll get some answers a little bit going forward, with all due respect to McLaughlin, with Estime, with Bidet, all those guys, and it'll shake out the way it does. Ideally, you want by the end of this season, the top 2 guys in carries to be Dobbins and Harvey, and everybody else to just be sprinkled in. You want them to earn that lion's share. We'll find out a little bit more starting on Saturday. Of course, the Broncos have 3 preseason games in front of them, and then they will get onto the regular season. And look, in a stacked AFC, getting off to a hot start is going to be really important. We're going to look at the first 4 games. Nate and I have different opinions on which ones that we think are the most important to stand out. We each have one in particular we'll talk about, but I want to remind you that, look, if you haven't been outside today, it's gorgeous. Yeah, it's a little hot, but what are you going to do? Well, in the weekend, what you should do? Go play some golf, and we know the spot for you. Denver Golf, 8 unique and distinctive courses, and the advantage of playing in Colorado, not only do you get that little kick up on your altitude on your drive, even if you're at City Park, but you get urban mountain settings and everything in between because you live in Colorado with all of those settings available to you. Since Denver golf courses are scattered throughout the metro area, no matter where you are, there's sure to be one conveniently located near you. And with professional and friendly customer service, everyone is welcome at all of Denver's courses. So look at booking your tee time today at cityofdenvergolf.com. You don't need memberships, none of that. It's yours. I mean, it's City of Denver. That's cityofdenver.com. So come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. I'm already nervous, Nate, about the headlines after week 1 because the Broncos are going to play a Titans team at home. The Titans, it'll be Cam Ward's debut. I think the Broncos are going to win that game rather handily. And then the hype train's already left the station. Everyone's going to be talking about the Broncos are Super Bowl ready. Okay, let's back off. Their opener, the reason that the Titans have Cam Ward is that they were awful. Okay, let's not forget that. They're terrible.
Number 1 pick.
Yeah, you have the number 1 pick for a reason, because you're bad. And they know they're bad. This is a rebuilding team. Tennessee's a game. The Broncos, if you're ever going to say there's a must-win opening game, it's probably that one. Because if you blow that one, you obviously have to look in the mirror at a lot of things, and the AFC is going to be tight. But I don't look at that game and go, I'm particularly worried about it. And the Colts game will be fascinating. But in the first 4 games of the season, 2 of them loom really large. The first one that you wanted to talk about is in week 3.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I did. To peel back the curtain for everybody, before the show today, I shot a note to Shawn, and I said, "Hey, man, what do you think is the most important game out of the first 4 on the schedule?" Which basically takes us through the month of September.
Yeah, shock of shocks. We do actually plan some of the show.
So I shot a note to Shawn, and I said, "Okay, tell me what you think the most important game out of the, like, what's your litmus test, if you will? What's the one game that you think is going to tell the most about this team?" And what I found interesting was I already knew what my answer was going to be. And Shawn's was actually different than what mine was. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting then. So my choice out of the first 4 games, that I think is the most important on the schedule, is actually the one against the Chargers.
Okay.
And it is for a handful of reasons. First and foremost, it's on the road.
Right.
And when we talk about this team going on, like, this Broncos team should beat the Colts, y'all, in week 2 on the road in Indianapolis.
Yeah, a team that still doesn't know who his quarterback is. Yeah, you'd think
100%.
so.
100% they should win that one. Okay. But now you're talking about going on the road against a divisional opponent, going on the road against an opponent that some people believe has the ability to challenge the Chiefs for the top spot in the division, the same way that the Broncos have a chance to be able to challenge the top spot for the Chiefs. And so when you look at that, I think that game becomes extremely important over the course of the first 3 weeks. How do you compare in Bo Nix's second year with this divisional opponent? So that's part of it for me. I think that one of the ways that the Broncos have the ability to challenge the Chiefs in the division is to make sure that they can get the job done on the road against the Raiders and against the Chargers. That to me is going to be extremely important. The other reason I say that I think it's going to be a bit of a litmus test is because, yes, we're talking about year 2 of Bo Nix, but we're also talking about year 2 of Jim Harbaugh. And I'm curious to see how the growth of those 2 individuals, one of them on the field and one of them off the field, compare when we get to week 3. So standings and all those kinds of things aside, look, we're given, Jim Harbaugh is going into year 2. Bo Nix is going into year 2. Who's going to show some growth? Who's going to show the ability to take advantage of that particular opponent? I think that game in and of itself, because I do believe there is a very high probability that the Broncos are 2-0 going into that game.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
In week 3. I think they can beat the Titans at home. In fact, I think they will beat the Titans substantially. And I'll call it right now. I'm calling right now Talanoa Hufanga is going to have a pick 6 in week 1. I'll put it on the calendar. Alex, mark the tape. August 7th. Nate said that Hufanga is going to have a pick 6 in week 1 against Cam Ward. Now, all of that said, Shawn, it was funny because I was really curious to see if you and I were going to come back to the same answer, and you didn't. You chose a different game.
I did. But the point you make is good because both Harbaugh and Peyton are kind of known as quarterback gurus, right? And let's be totally honest about this. I think in the pecking order, most people in the NFL feel that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Bo Nix at this point, and why wouldn't they, quite frankly? And so if in the second year of Jim Harbaugh, quarterback guru who took a team to the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith, it gets with Herbert for another year, you'd like to think that they're going to get better too. And remember, they finished above the Broncos. They swept the Broncos last year. The Broncos have to get over the Chargers if they want to take the AFC West seriously. Everyone seems to forget all of a sudden they finished in third and got swept by the Chargers last year. That's one of the humps they have to get over. But I am looking towards the next week. And to be honest, as I look at it today, I think they probably, this year, I think they split with the Chargers. I think they probably each win their home games. So it wouldn't shock me if the Broncos came in 2-0 and left 2-1. Obviously, if it turns out better, that's great. But it's the next game against Cincinnati, Monday Night Football, prime time, all the spotlight, even if the Broncos are 2-1, but especially if they're 3-0. Wow, the hype train's going to be going crazy for the Denver Broncos. And we know he's not quite the quarterback Justin Herbert is. We definitely know he's not the quarterback Joe Burrow is. And the Bengals do have their troubles. They had plenty of troubles last year, injury troubles, roster troubles, contract troubles, all of that. They still finished one game behind the Broncos for a playoff spot, and the tiebreaker, of course. But you're talking about in the AFC. Let's think about the way it stacks out, right? We know that the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. I know fans are excited about maybe the Broncos unseating them, as we're talking about with the Chargers. Hold your horses. But the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. They're at least a playoff team. The Bills aren't going anywhere. The Ravens aren't going anywhere. And somebody has to win the AFC South. That's 4 spots of the 7 they're already taken up. We know the Chargers were ahead of the Broncos. That's 5. Okay, maybe we can say the Steelers are gonna roll off. Okay, with the who knows, shambling corpse of Aaron Rodgers dripping. Who knows? But we've said that about Mike Tomlin teams for how many years, and he finds a way to drag them into the playoffs. So I think they'll be in the mix. Cincinnati is going to be in the mix. As long as Burrow's on 2 feet, they are dangerous, and they are one of the Broncos' rivals for those wild card spots. And we understand that if the Bengals are a little bit healthier, if they're in a little bit better mood because of the contracts situations, if they get their guys signed, they could be right there with Denver top to bottom. So this, to me, looks like one of these games where this might be a tiebreaker game. These two teams could finish with the same record or 1 game apart, and this one is going to be the deciding factor. I think this game is really the litmus test for the Broncos, not only where they stand against the Bengals, but where they stand in the pecking order of the entire AFC.
Well, and let me throw this out at you, Shawn. As long as we're talking about the Broncos schedule, there are some fans right now of the Broncos that could argue that the most important game is the very first one against the Titans. And the reason being is because, well, and who blew it last year in week 1? Cincinnati.
Yep.
They lost to the Patriots. Folks that do gambling or do pools or things like that, in survivor pools.
Oh, yeah. That was devastating.
The national average was that over 62% of people were eliminated from their survivor pool last year because they took the Bengals to beat the Patriots in week 1 last year. And New England won that game 16-10. And all of these people, myself included, were eliminated from survivor pools because the Bengals came out flat on their face and just assumed that they were going to beat the Patriots at home. And they didn't. And going back, Shawn, to exactly what you just said about the standings, if the Bengals win that game in week 1, we are talking about a very interesting scenario over the course of the last 3 weeks of the regular season last year in terms of who makes the wild card and who doesn't. Okay.
Yeah. In case you were forgetting about that, the Bengals started 1-3. They started 4-8.
Yes.
And then they went on a rampage, including beating Denver in overtime, and finished only a game behind the Broncos. Had the Broncos slipped anywhere, the Bengals would have jumped them because they had the tiebreaker.
Or if the Bengals hadn't effed up
against the Patriots.
Against the Patriots.
Just that game. They're in the playoffs over the Denver Broncos.
Correct, because they take the tiebreaker. So I will say this. Again, I don't think it's going to happen against a young Cam Ward, but you never know, okay? I mean, look, the same things, like, let me flip the script real quick. The same things that we said last year and that we said that we've been saying here over the course of the offseason. Defensive coordinators now have an entire year's worth of film, 17 regular season games plus the playoffs of Bo Nix, which means defensive coordinators now can look for tendencies. They can look for ways to try to get to number 10. Okay. Well, guess what? Week 1 against the Titans, NFL defensive coordinators have jack squat on Cam Ward other than what came out of college. And so does that mean that maybe Cam Ward can come out and do some things against a Vance Joseph defense? I don't think he can because of how good this defense is. And let's be honest, folks, the Bengals defense, not in the same stratosphere as the Broncos. Okay. The Bengals, their biggest link, weakest link is their defense. It's not their offense. It's not Joe Burrow. It's not Jamar Chase. It's not T. Higgins. It's not all that. The biggest link of the chain that is weak for the Bengals is their defense. That's not the case for Denver, and that's why I think Denver will be fine against the Titans. However, I lost out on a survivor pool because
you were one of the 60-something%. Okay.
So, yeah, exactly. So, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I did think that it was interesting that you and I thought of the first 4 games, the quarter poll, if you will, even though now it's 17 game schedule. The quarter poll, and that is still how head coaches judge their teams. What are we going to do in the first 4? What are we going to do in the second 4? What are we going to do in the third 4? They still look at their team that way, even though it's not divisible by 4 anymore, and we're dealing with a prime number. Those 4 games that start off things, I believe going on the road against the Chargers is the big one. You say it's Cincy. I think all 4 of them are a big deal, to be honest with you, because I do think you got to get the job done. I would love to see them.
What do they have to come out? 3-1? If they come out 2-2, are you still feeling?
If they come out 2-2, I'm going to be disappointed. I think they need to come out 3-3, and I think that 3-3, or 3-1. Sorry, 3-1. They need 3 wins. If somehow they started out 3-0, like they go into LA and they beat the Chargers, the game that I'm highlighting, and for some reason they lose to Joe Burrow and company on Monday Night Football, I'm still going to be okay with that. I think at the quarter poll, Shawn, they need to be 3-1.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think they need that if they want to live up to the expectations that we've been talking about. Again, peeling back the curtain, there's a great piece that we're working on for the next issue of Mile High Sports Magazine right now that involves an entire team of us that have been chiming in a roundtable style format. I think for any of us to be happy with the predictions that we've been asked to do for the magazine, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but for us to live up to those expectations, Shawn, that we've been putting on paper that are going to wind up in the next issue of the magazine, I think that they better be 3-1, or the collective group of us that have been contributing to a lot of this content are going to be pretty frustrated.
Yeah, and
we're going to not live up to what we want.
Because you're right. We both look at these as different games, but we kind of agree. Look, if they win 1 and drop 1, but they win the first 2, if they come out 3-1, they're okay. But you can't go at 2-2, and you definitely can't go 2-2 following the Chargers.
And you can't do
the Bengals.
And you can't do exactly what you just described. The Bengals.
You can't
go
lose
1
to
and
Bengals
4.
and Chargers. You can't.
No.
Even 2-2. If you were 2-2, somehow blew it somehow started out with a disaster. Started out 0-2 against the Titans and the Colts, but then beat the Chargers and the Bengals. That's a different feeling 2-2. Correct. Than go ahead and losing to the Chargers and the Bengals. Remember, Bo Nix in his first year for everything that we like. 2-6 against playoff teams last year. That's got to improve.
Yeah, it absolutely has to improve. All right, as we go through today's program on a Thursday, by the way, we've got some preseason football coming up this evening. We're actually going to transition here in a moment, but I will tell you that I need to have a conversation about my friends. I'm going to give 2 plugs here at the moment. You can probably tell from what's behind me with the brick and the concert posters. I'm hanging out with our friends at Crazy Mountain Brewing right now, and the guy that's coming up, Drew Creasman. This is one of his favorite places to be able to hang out in all of Denver. But you know what goes really good with an ice cold beer of your choice? It is some really good barbecue, and that is our friends at Rolling Smoke Barbecue. You find them all over Denver. Remember, Terry and his crew, they started out as a food truck, folks, about a decade ago. And it was so popular what they were doing that then all of a sudden they had a brick and mortar location up at the Stanley Marketplace in Aurora. And then they opened the location in Centennial at the corner of Dry Creek and University. Then they opened up inside the Golden Mill. And now they have their newest location on 38th up in Wheat Ridge. It is hardwood smoked, phenomenal meats, exactly the way you would want them to be prepared. Folks, Terry's originally from Oklahoma. He knows what he's doing when it comes to the great barbecue that they serve there. And every single side that you get to enjoy at Rolling Smoke is always done fresh that day. And that's why sometimes you walk into one of the locations and up over their shoulder, right there where you're placing your order, is going to be a chalkboard that says, hey man, we're out of this or this. And it's because they aren't going to have stuff sit around. It's not going to be sitting in the cooler. They are making it fresh for you every single day. So whether you are looking for a spot for some takeout, whether you're looking for somebody to cater an event, maybe you're already starting to plan some of your football parties at your house and you want somebody else to take care of the catering for you, or you're just looking for a great night out for barbecue, remember, Rolling Smoke Barbecue's got 4 locations all around the Denver metro area. You can go to rollingsmokebbq.com. That is their website. You'll find those locations. You'll see the menus, what you can choose in terms of your catering, whatever it is that you need for your next event or just a night out with the family. I'm telling you, it is the best barbecue in all of Denver. I cannot speak highly enough for them and their service and the entire crew. So stop by and see them today. And when you do, tell them the guys from Mile High Sports sent you. Coming up next, it's time to take a visit over to 20th and Blake. Yes, they got rocked by the Toronto Blue Jays, but they also had the National League Player of the Week. Drew Creasman joins Shawn next.
When I go to court, these aren't my clients. These are my friends. These are people that I believe in. And they have one shot, just one shot for justice. If they've come to me and we've gotten to trial, their life has been turned upside down in some awful way. And I am their only hope. I need to be their champion, to quote Prince Oberyn from Game of Thrones. They need someone in this trial by combat that can fight for them. I'm all they have. So if I haven't put the time in, if I haven't trained, if I haven't humbly looked in the mirror and thought about ways I can be better, and I don't present my best self in court, then I failed them. And that's what motivates me as a trial lawyer, because when this is over, that client goes home. And if I haven't done my best for him, I haven't been his champion, then I've failed.
We are joined by Drew Creasman, the lead Rockies writer from MileHighSports.com and the host of the 20th and a Blake podcast. Drew, first question for you, very straightforward. Well, actually, 2 questions. One, nice job on the 8-bit shirts.
I was going to say, we got
the memo. We got the memo. Second, Nate Lundy's sitting there down at Crazy Mountain.
He's there.
Why didn't he call you? What's up with that?
I was going to say, well, I thought I said he's there and I'm here. And then I don't know.
You could have at least hit him up for a beer or something, you know? I mean, holy cow. And you need one after the last series for the Rockies in Toronto. Folks, they lost the 3-game series by a combined total of 45-6. That is a blowout in a football game. In baseball, it is mind-bending. 63 hits. That's the most for any team in a 3-game set since 1900. Seems like the Rockies have had more than a few times. We've talked about this, and we have to go since 1900. Quick math, 1900 is 125 years ago.
Oh, you're right.
I mean, oh my goodness. Colorado native Kevin Gossman for the Blue Jays said after that quote, averaging 20 plus hits in a game in a 3-game series is pretty absurd. I don't think you can say anything else. I think he was talking about the Blue Jays, but he probably spoke for Rockies fans as well.
It works. Yes. It's one of those times you say incredible. I mean, like, which way do you mean? Yes. It was incredible. It was,
I mean, double-digit runs allowed in all 3 games. It wasn't like one of these was crazy. It was 15-1, then 10-4. The Rockies really were close in that one. And then 20-1 after having a 1-0 lead last night. Just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And it even came on the heels of a series in which they had that ridiculous game against Pittsburgh, that 17-16 game where, okay, sure, they had this magical thing where they came back against an absolutely terrible bullpen.
But gave up 16 to the Pirates.
But that is the other thing that also happened in that game. And so
it's unbelievable.
Man, what in the world? And they did beat Paul Skeens the next day. And I actually even went out on social media and said, that's maybe the most impressive win of the entire season. Coming back against Paul Skeens was more, because that other game was just nonsense.
That was more runs, if I'm correct, more earned runs than Skeens allowed the entire month.
That's right. Yeah. He had never given up a 3-run home run until Jordan Beck got him, and it was well earned. It's also not like he came in and was a little bit off because Coors Field was messing with him. He was throwing a no-hitter for a minute, and the Rockies just got on, like, the good part. The guys who are actually doing decent things right now for the Rocks got on him a bit, and it was like, okay, cool. But yeah, then this series against the Blue Jays almost wipes out your ability to like ride off of that Paul Skeens win. You're not remember getting ski. It's I don't know what you say, Shawn.
Yeah, I mean after the All-Star break, you know, Warren Schaefer correctly pointed out at one point, I think the Rockies were 7-6, which when you're as far under as the Rockies are at the at the season mark, you look at it and say, okay, maybe things are turning around. And then you run into this. The Rockies are now 30-84. It's a disaster, but at least they are seemingly doing the right thing when it comes to young players. We'll talk about warming Bernabel in a moment, but you shared with me before the show, they've had now 11 major league debuts this season, which, look, if you're this bad, you need to start just throwing spaghetti at the wall and see if something sticks, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another number I'd forgotten about. 32 in the last 3 years. Since the beginning of the 2023 season, the Colorado Rockies have seen 32 Major League Baseball debuts. There's only 26 guys on a roster.
Yeah, right.
So, it's been quite something. Of course, something like 8 of them are no longer even in the organization. Half of those guys aren't guys you expect to do much for you going forward, but you weren't necessarily counting on warming Bernabel. You're still maybe not. It was a great week, but some of these guys, you got to throw it at the wall. This is the season where you do get to see what sticks, who's got it, and as we've talked about, maybe who doesn't. The fact that Michael Toglia was landing on the side of doesn't is one of the big things that opened up a spot here for warming Bernabel to show what he's going to do. So, now that we get into really the dog days, it's the time to find out, who among these guys is going to rise up.
And I do think it's important when you look at this season, it is a lost season. It's going to be another 100-loss season. It'll be 3 in a row for the Rockies, that at a certain point you do look at it and say, hey, okay, finding out that Michael Toglia is not the guy is still progress. And I think it is important when you have a bad team to understand that, you look at those top 30 prospects, however you have it internally, MLB.com, whatever, and Bernabel was on the top 30 in the lower half, but he was there. But you do have to find out ruling guys out is still part of the process. And if you don't do it, you are delaying your progression forward. So it isn't bad in this case. And in Bernabel's case, terrific. But I'll give you an idea of how bad the Rockies offense is. Okay, yeah. Warren Bernabel's been up for 11 games. 11 games. Well, earned NL Player of the Week and deserved it for 400, with power. On wins above replacement, which is
going to say,
cumulative stat over most of the season.
Right.
Above replacement, Warming Bernabel has been on the team for 11 games. He is 5th among all Rockies offensively. That, more than anything, illustrates how bad the Rockies offense would be.
Yeah.
And that includes Ryan McMahon, who's now playing for the New York Yankees. Among active Rockies, he's fourth after a week and change.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I will say one thing about that. Tyler Freeman gets killed by WAR, and he deserves better. He's up there striking out 8% of the time. But other than that, that's real bad. That's really, really bad. I think, the silver linings are what we've talked about is just that you are finding out who does and doesn't have it. And as you mentioned, even certain things like at first base, it's not just you're giving Warming Bernabel the shot, but over in AA, they've moved Charlie Condon, who is more of a full-time third base guy, over to first full-time. Those are the things that you can do when you're learning about this stuff, especially right after you just drafted Ethan Holiday, who a lot of people expect to move over to third. Maybe he stays shortstop, but you can start to move things around a little bit when you're taking in this information. And you are, as you put it, throwing spaghetti against the wall, as opposed to doing what they used to do all the time, which was signing quality veterans who would come in and they'd lose 96 games and people wouldn't be as irate. But you don't learn anything in those seasons. You don't build your farm system in those seasons. And there's been a lot to like about what's going on in the Rockies farm system, frankly, and you can understand why in the last 3 days I've been watching more farm system, minor league, yard goats, and isotopes games the last couple of weeks, because that's where the future of this team is.
Well, let's actually look at that, because we'll see where Bernabel is at. Obviously, there's no question that he's got, some pop. We're talking about, already, the 3 home runs in 11 games, and that will change when people get a book on him. But at the same time, we know that Kyle Karros is coming quickly at third base. Maybe there's an option there. You talked about Condon, who the presumption was third base. He could also play in the outfield. But I kind of look going forward at this team. Holiday may be a little bit further out. And I say maybe because it didn't take Jackson Holiday all that long, and Ethan Holiday, by most reports, is even more advanced and a better player than Jackson, and that comes from even Jackson. So it's not as if we're projecting because he got on the Rockies.
Good source.
But looking forward, Kyle Karros looks like he's going to get a crack at it before the season comes to an end. It's possible Charlie Condon could too. Condon, of course, is the Golden Spikes winner, is likely to come quickly. But Jordan Beck has done everything you've asked a guy to do down in the minors. Looks like he may be a keeper. We'll find out a little more about Zach Veen as he comes along. But now when you look at the idea of going forward, Adele Amador brought up now with Tyro Estrada being on the IL. But you look at Karros, you look at Condon, you look at Holiday. Tovar, of course, is already kind of a cornerstone guy. What do are the Rockies actually just kind of figuring the talent will sort itself out? Because that's actually a welcome change. Because for the last couple of years, you talked about it. They've been signing vets and then saying, don't worry about it. All these kids on the farm are all going to be amazing. Wait till you see Michael Tolia. He's going to tear it up. And then it doesn't happen. So are the Rockies actually, is there sort of a sea change here that eventually these 100 losses are kind of banging them in the noggin and saying, hey, don't presume that prospect X is going to be the next Todd Helton, and go ahead and just keep adding talent and let it bubble up and put them where their talent demands they stay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I thought the best example of that was the pickup of Rock Reggio in the Jake Bird deal. That's a spot where essentially they were looking at like Ariel Amador has to be good. Otherwise at second base, we really don't have anything. Maybe Ryan Ritter, that's kind of an interesting guy that's emerged, but they go and they make a move for this guy who's sitting on 18 home runs in like 60 games in the minor leagues. And you go, okay, there's a guy who now, like you said, is going to push it. Now at spring training next year, it's not just going to be it's not just Ariel Amador's job because he used to rank high on the prospect charts. It's like, no, man, there's going to be a competition. And if Rock Reggio shows up next year and slugs in spring training, then he'll be the second baseman and not Ariel Amador. I love stuff like that. I think that is similar going on with some of these pitchers, some of the guys they've brought up in the bullpen, the great story of Dugan Darnell, which was one of those major league debuts. And it's like, no, that's not somebody you're probably counting on, but he's got a few weeks here to show maybe he can become somebody that you can pencil into your bullpen next year that you weren't necessarily counting on.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a couple years in the future, and I'll just quickly go around it. But let's just say we're three years from now, and let's say everything you hope the way it hits. But you keep Hunter Goodman at catcher until he proves he can't handle the job. Let's say Charlie Condon takes over at first, Tovar stays at third. Let's say Kyle Karros sticks, so Parker Tovar at short, Kyle Karros sticks at third. So Ethan Holiday, well, if you can play short, you can play second. So maybe Holiday ends up taking second, right? Who worries about that? Maybe your outfield is some combination of Brenton Doyle, Jordan Beck, and Zach Veen. There's not much to dislike about that. And guys like Bernabel and Amador and Reggio, they can be depth pieces. And that looks good. But that brings us to the next part, the pitching, because right now for the Rockies, it has been a long time. We just talked about the 63 hits in 3 games. It's been a long time since I've looked at Rockies pitching and said, it is this bad. And by the way, we're talking about the Colorado Rockies, a team in which in their entire multiple decade history, no one's ever said, man, look at the Rockies pitching. They're so good. I mean, this is a historically bad franchise for pitching. And right now it looks as bad to my mind as it's ever looked.
Yeah, at the major league level, it absolutely is. This is as bad as your starting pitching can essentially get. I think, again, the good news is that you don't expect this. The last time the Rockies actually had a big turnaround, I did an article, I think it was earlier this year, maybe some other time, on milehighsports.com about when you look at the 2015 Colorado Rockies starting rotation. And then you look at the 2017 team that went to the postseason for the first time in 2 consecutive seasons, completely different starting rotation. A lot of those position players were the same. A lot of guys on the 2015 team were named Nolan Arenado and Charlie Blackmon. Trevor Story came the next year. A lot of those guys were already there, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. The position players are arriving first. They're establishing themselves. They look like they're a pretty good group, but now it all depends upon Chase Dollander, Brody Brecht, Sean Sullivan, Gabriel Hughes. This guy they just got in the Ryan McMahon trade, Griffin Herring, looks like he's going to factor into that a little bit. Maybe JB Middleton, who they just picked up in the draft. Those are kind of the names, but it's going to live and die with those guys because position players can only take you so far.
How quickly do we think we see some of these start? Are we going to see a scenario soon in which the starters are getting the kind of debuts that we've seen from the position players?
I hope so. I'd really like to see Sullivan in particular. Unfortunately, Gabriel Hughes has just slowed down and had a rougher last couple of games in Double-A. So for his sake, I think you want him to iron some things out there. Brody Brecht is just a little bit further away in general. So I think we're going to see some more of, unfortunately, these guys who are more in that Tanner Gordon, Bradley Blaylock. We saw Anthony Molina the other night. They got a Connor Van Scoyoc. They got a Mason Albright. Those are not your top prospects, but they are guys who are in Triple-A and have pitched fairly well. and maybe you back to our conversation about finding out what you do and don't have. They might be finding out, okay, Tanner Gordon's not going to be the guy. Doesn't look like. So
yeah, I mean that's part of the value, right? Even if they're not prospects, some surprise you, and maybe some don't. They're what you expect, and you're like, this guy's got to be in long relief if he makes the team at all. But again, that process of elimination matters. So for the Rockies, we know it's going to be a long season. They get back at it in Arizona, start a 6-game road trip tomorrow. We'll see if things get a little better. I mean, it's hard to imagine they can get worse, but we'll make sure we stay on top of it. For all the latest, Drew Creasman, our lead Rockies writer, and of course, check out the latest
differential.
Don't look at it. Fans, don't. I'm not kidding. Don't look at it. You don't want to see it. It is ugly. It makes the record look good. It's that bad. So we'll find out about if the Rockies can use this time frame in which the lessons are comparatively cheap and get the right things out of them. We'll have a chance to talk about that. But follow Drew for all the latest and check out the latest 20th and Blake while you're at it. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Always appreciate you, Shawn. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much, Drew Creasman, joining us. The Rockies, as we pointed out, obviously well under 500 at 30-84. You'll want to follow Drew for all of the latest. So thanks so much for all of that. And obviously, as we look to wrap this up today, Alex, go ahead and we can let Drew go, obviously, and we'll get to wrapping this up because the Broncos will be back at it. They had their joint practice today with the 49ers. There will not be one tomorrow. Kyle Shanahan talked about it a little bit. We talked about it earlier in the week. Even though joint practices are actually more valuable to coaches now than preseason games. And Kyle Shanahan was one of the guys at the forefront of that explaining it. But in this case, the second day, it's hot. You're getting into the dog days of August here. By the time the second day rolls around, Kyle Shanahan brought up there's a lot of fights. There's a lot of the extracurricular activities, and you just don't get the same value out of it. So they have the one today. They'll take a break tomorrow. They'll play the game on Saturday. Don't expect to see Dre Greenlaw for any part of that, but curious to see what the Broncos will do. They have said they will play the starters for some of it, the ones that are healthy enough. Obviously, we'll have a chance to talk about that with Troy Renck of the Denver Post tomorrow as well. But thanks to Drew Creasman for joining us. Thanks to Nate Lundy for joining us as well. Different opinions on how the Broncos schedule starts. We'll talk about that and concerns about the run game. It all looks good, but until you see it get done, you don't really know. And maybe we'll get our first crack at it on Saturday to see what the Broncos running game looks like. Thanks to Alex Becker sitting in for Danny Bailey. Always great to have Alex in the house. But thanks to you. Whether you're watching it live or you're watching it on your time, that's exactly why we do it the way we do it. You can check out Drew's podcast right here on this same channel, as well as all the other terrific programming that we have here for you. Looking forward for you to check out all of it. We will get back at it tomorrow. It is a Football Friday, the first one of the year, because the Broncos will get preseason going on Saturday. Looking forward to it. For all of us here at Mile High Sports, I'm Shawn Drotar. Thanks for watching Mile High Sports today.